In the CISO series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
It's not a test. Critical flaws found in U.S. emergency alert system. Twilio and Cloudflare get phished, and deepfake cybercrime is on the rise. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get opinions, insight, expertise, and more from our wonderful guest, Jack Kufal, the CISO at Michigan Medicine. Jack, thank you so much for being here. Can't wait to dig into all the stories of the day.
Thanks for so much for having me.
Before we move on, we got to thank our sponsor, Edgescan, necessary protection for your attack surface. Remember, you can join us on LinkedIn Live to do so. Go to CISOseries.com, look for the Week in Review page. You can find the link there. We're not going to wait for you to do so because we've only got about 20 minutes. So let's dig into the news. Critical flaws found in U.S. emergency alert system. The U.S. government is warning of critical vulnerabilities in its emergency alert system that, if exploited, could enable intruders to send fake alerts out over television, radio, and cable networks. The Department of Homeland Security said in an advisory it was recently informed about the flaws in EAS encoder and decoder devices and is now urging organizations that operate EAS to ensure that their devices and supporting systems are updated, patched, firewalled, and monitored, with audit logs regularly reviewed to ensure there is no unauthorized access. So, Jack, I think we can go all the way back to, if you want to go old school, Orson Welles' 1939 War of the Worlds broadcast. We know bad things can happen when people hear emergency broadcasts. It's become a hair trigger issue recently when even a comment made in a newscast can push people into what can seem like drastic actions. As someone who works in the medical and healthcare industry, what do you feel could be done to fix what seems to be a glaring weakness in our emergency infrastructure?
Inside healthcare, but also inside cybersecurity, we deal with a lot of alerts and alarming, and there's a lot of fatigue associated with it. So, part of it is absolutely identify the problem early in the emergency alert system, patch and be vigilant about it. But it's also, I would say, incumbent upon the people who receive those emergency alerts to look for secondary alerts, which we almost naturally do as humans. If you hear something extreme is happening in the news, you check that source, you look at another source, you talk to somebody, you read about it online. So biggest piece of advice is, as a consumer of emergency services, be aware of the emergencies, but also confirm before you act, which is very similar to what we do inside healthcare and hospitals. There's primary alert systems, secondary alert systems. They have the same weaknesses. If for nothing else, a lot of them are attractive nuisances, right? Like the electronic road sign on the highways to tell you zombies ahead, those types of things. They're just going to always attract, so they're going to be a target. So harden them, but also as a user, consider multiple sources of information when you're going to act on an emergency situation.
Yeah, and I also feel like on a end user perspective, because we have more, I guess, media channels, like I'm thinking about like everyone gets their breaking news from different places. Yes, obviously emergency alerts would have like a large impact on radio or TV or something like that. But people also have, kind of to your point, those secondary alert systems. Not that it wouldn't be a way to massively spread misinformation if left unchecked and undiagnosed. Luckily, we are getting these patches. But I also feel like as an end user, if I receive the bombs are dropping, I might check, I don't know, I might check my Feedly account just to maybe verify that.
You might check something, right? The bombs are dropping. You're probably going to want to confirm that, but also the bombs are dropping. Go out and burn down the village is probably not your first response. It's probably going to be, the bombs are dropping. Well, I wonder what I'm supposed to do, right? I wonder where I'm supposed to go. And usually, information gets there. So it's alarming when there's failures or weaknesses in something that says emergency. But with that one in particular, I think we're insulated a little bit because we have multiple streams of information. And it's more about discipline and train yourself to confirm before you act.
All right, well, our next story here, Twilio and Cloudflare get phished. A little bit of a long read, a lot of issues here to break down, so let's get into it. The communications integration company Twilio confirmed that unauthorized actors gained access to customer data as of August 4th. This appears to be the result of social engineering, with several employees tricked into handing over login credentials from SMS phishing messages purportedly from the company's IT department. The company was aware of the phishing messages and contacted carriers to stop the messages, but threat actors rotated through carriers and hosting providers to continue the campaign. Then Then later in the week, Cloudflare confirmed it got hit by these same attackers too. The company said 3 employees fell for this same phishing scam. However, it used hardware-based MFA keys, and that prevented intruders from accessing its internal network. So the employees, did the click through, but didn't get to the next step there. The details again show that the attacker is being very methodical and sophisticated, obtaining work and home numbers of Cloudflare employees and family members in an effort to make phishing successful. It's estimated that at least 76 Cloudflare employees received phishing text messages within the first minute of the attack, and that phishing domains were registered only 40 minutes prior. So a lot to kind of look at here: social engineering, employees handing over data, threat actors shifting carriers, Cloudflare's using MFA. I'm just curious, Jack, which one kind of stands out to you?
The way that social engineering is evolving and going multi-channel, right? We talk about multi-channel communication, whether you're using a persistent chat client or SMS messages or email or whatever the case may be in your workplace or even at home. So the social engineering and the threat vectors have gone multi-channel as well. I don't think we talk about it that way. I think we educate and we make people aware. We try to insulate ourselves against sort of not even N-1 type vectors, but maybe even N-4, like the really, really old stuff, right? And part of that is also how you communicate with your end user. So it always seems to be IT, like fake IT scams that are impacting the corporation or finances, right? But the fake IT ones hit everybody because everybody needs IT. Everybody does. And everyone's also somewhat subordinate to the idea of patching and maintenance and IT help and those types of things. IT as a service segment of any corporation doesn't necessarily do a good job, in my experience, with telling users how they can expect to consume IT services. So it seems a lot of times perfectly reasonable that something pops up on my screen that says, "Hey, I think I can help. You want me to fix this? Just give me your admin password and I'll take care of that." So it speaks to that very clearly. So there's a communication breakdown between, I think, IT and their constituents. But I also think that the social engineering piece is going to get a lot more advanced because it's perpetually sort of successful because it's really, really cheap to do. And it's really, really easy to get open source intelligence information on a lot of people inside your corporation. So we haven't reached that inflection point yet where there's things besides education awareness that can really cut away at that. So the other answer might be, well, how do we start compartmentalizing what particularly our privileged users inside a corporation have access to at any given time? So changing the experience from I have everything I need on my workstation to I only get access to what I need on my workstation for a particular function. So the impact of being phished or smished is blunted.
Yeah, and with this highly targeted phishing, and you're getting click-through on 3 out of 76 potentially, let's double that. Even if it was 3 in 140, that's still crazy high compared to the click-through that we see with most spam phishing, like more just general throw the net out there and try and grab a fish, right?
Absolutely. And it's almost always because that doesn't take much personal information to create that emotional connection with an end user to allow that type of access, right? And it can be something that's a burning priority. Here's a 0-day patch. We're trying to fix it. And gee, don't you want to save the hospital from being blacked out? Or it can be, absolutely completely personal, right? I think some of our most successful phishing campaigns speak to when we do simulated phishing campaigns, speak to things like parking updates. Because parking is one of the things that touches everybody, and everybody is somewhat disappointed with it, or used to be before work from home.
All right, well, moving on here. Deepfake cybercrime increasing. These come from among the findings of VMware's annual Global Incident Threat Response report that showed cyber attacks using deepfake tools increased 13% in the year, and 66% of respondents said they saw at least one incident of it. VMware also noted there was an increase in complaints about people using deepfakes and stolen identity information to apply for remote work positions. That was actually reported by the FBI, and that was just kind of a footnote that VMware noted. So, Jack, deepfakes, are kind of to video what SMS is to messaging, I guess. In your position, what do you do to educate and prepare your teams around deepfakes, I guess both from a cybersecurity and remote work scenario?
We haven't done much yet. This is sort of right on the emerging space for us, in particular the scams where fake job offers are going out. Again, hitting that emotional high point, people looking for a job, people being offered a job. So there's lots of emotion and urgency to react to those types of things. And what's unfortunate is the way that they're constructed is, since they don't use many of our corporate or our institution's resources to pull off, there's not much we can do except educate and make aware. But it is right at that inflection point where we probably do quite a bit of education and training, broad spectrum across the our institution, where everybody gets the same stuff. And this probably points out an area where we need to start to target it. So, for us in healthcare, one of the places we're always hiring is going to be in the nurses or the hospital staff type area, where there's a large volume of our workforces there, and there's a turnover, and you have to hire and hire and hire. So the key point's going to be there, maybe with the nurse supervisors, nurse managers, HR, the HR business partners, those types, and start training them with a little bit more mature content so that they can help identify these things. Because even though they're going to happen, what happens is the rock that's being thrown into the pond is displacing much more and causing much more turbulence than what the attack really warrants. So getting more of the business partners to be educated that this is part of the game now. We have to be aware of these things. So when people do reach out to us, they don't have to reach out from, maybe the hiring manager to their HR person, to the chief of HR, over the chief of information service and back again, but really a little bit more just in time to identify those scams and help communicate and contain them. That's probably what we can do mostly right now, in addition to communicating with cohorts, because they're going to rebrand a scam, a nursing hiring scam, for hospitals all over the place. So the more we make that aware, the better we can be prepared for it.
All right, next up, CISA should split from DHS. That's according to Chris Krebs. That's former CISA director Chris Krebs, if you want to be official, and he called for significant adjustments to the U.S. government's approach to cybersecurity on Wednesday. During a keynote address at Black Hat, Krebs proposed the creation of a U.S. digital agency, which would incorporate elements of, let's just take a deep breath here, CISA, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the Department of Energy, as well as parts of the Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Communications Commission. The goal, he says, is to add privacy, trust, and safety issues to the existing security profiles. We've seen a lot of proactive cybersecurity development as of late, particularly under the current administration, although we can go back to 2018, the creation of CISA under the Trump administration as well. Chris Krebs obviously knows the business very well. Do you feel this new proposed agency is a step forward, Jack, or are we getting too many cooks in the kitchen?
First, absolutely agree on what CISA is doing. They are not only an information resource, but they've been a really great human resource. So anybody out there who hasn't engaged with their local CISA, it's really worthwhile. It's really worth looking into it. That being said, I'm sort of halfway there with Chris Krebs, and far be it from me to not fully agree with him. CISA does seem misplaced in DHS.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean the answer to it is here's this new agency. In particular, when he starts talking about the steps that I think the federal government has to take, and lots of people think they have to take, with how we organize our thoughts and our legislations and our rules and standards around privacy. We're a little weak there from the legislative book of what we do and don't do with privacy. And that's a whole nother section. But I don't know if you take the non-intelligence organization of CISA, which is kind of glommed in there with other parts of the intelligence community, and separate it out and take a bunch of other units with it. I think it's already a pretty complicated soup of agencies, and just organizing them that way without a common thread between them, which with DHS, there's a common thread of information sharing and collaboration. CISA's a little bit outside of that. So what is that common thread that we pull through there? And, he was on the inside, so he probably understands these units a lot better than I. But, I don't know if, NIST should be in the same, I would put them in the same bucket of where CISA is, and what's the common thread between them. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. It seems like a little bit of a jump, and the ground seems pretty soft since we are relatively immature on individual and corporate privacy laws at the federal level to start with. We're probably 10 years away from seeing anything major there, in my opinion, because the states are still popping up all their own, so how does intercommerce happen with all the different state privacy versus all the different federal privacy? It's a pretty big open question. So yes, CISA's a little bit odd man out there, but I'm not sure the instant answer is a Just Add Water civilian agency with all these other groups.
Yeah, it seems like a very greenfield. I know he's talking about bringing together a bunch of agencies, but that seems easier to do much more theoretically from starting from nothing, as opposed to the murky interdepartmental workings of all these agencies are already kind of, have back channels and ancillary relationships with each other.
Well, it would also require some culminating event, right? So what is the culminating event that brings together those administrations and bureaucracies? I don't know, right? On the DHS side, right, there was a culminating event. So what's the similar on our side? And I think, unfortunately, I think it's going to have to be something better than get your house in order with privacy. It's going to have to be something different, and probably something incredibly unique, because all the other big examples of sectors and industries getting together like that are from the private sector out, like what they did in finance and so forth. Mm-hmm. So it's a good open question. I don't know what the specific problem is yet to say, hey, that's an answer to that problem.
All right, well, before we move on to our next story, let's spend a few moments with our sponsor, Edgescan. Edgescan simplifies vulnerability management by delivering a single full-stack SaaS solution integrated with world-class security professionals. Instead of managing a plethora of point scanning tools for each layer of the attack surface and squandering precious staff resources manually removing false positives, Edgescan offers automated and accurate contextualized alerts across the entire attack surface into a single source of truth. For more information, visit edgescan.com. All right, next up here, Cisco admits corporate network compromised by a gang with links to Lapsus. Cisco disclosed this fact on Wednesday, stating that an employee's personal Google account had been compromised. The disclosure of the months-old incident also happened to occur after a list of files accessed during the incident appeared on the dark web. Their security incident response and Cisco Talos teams specified the data exfiltration was from an account with cloud storage locker box that was associated with a compromised employee's accounts. So I guess, Jack, here we see the shadow of shadow IT looming over one of the biggest players in the business. As we've seen, it only takes one hit like this for malware to take root and spread throughout a global network. Yet people continue to use third-party services because we all work in an ecosystem, and sometimes we just want the thing we know that works super fast, and we feel like that's not getting in the way of what we want to try and do at work. Cisco might have dodged a bullet here. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this scenario.
I think in this scenario, and taking it from the big megacorp that is Cisco, and it's a network vendor, it's a security vendor, it's a service vendor, right? And it's one of those, if it was going to be avoided any place, you'd hope it'd be the place you're buying your security stuff from. But I think it's a stronger message to be able to say this is human nature and this happens. And if your security strategy is all about preventing humans from being humans, preventing humans from checking their personal email, preventing humans from having a BYO device or functioning in a way that they're comfortable, I don't know if that's reasonable. I think you can curtail it, but you're not going to eliminate it. We don't work in secure enclaves 24/7, even though more and more companies and industries are, at least from an intellectual property point of view, really needing services like that. So a lot of it comes down to, how do you organize that ecosystem so when it does occur, the impacts are less? So how do you engineer for that human and that human experience that says, okay, people are going to find a way to check their personal email. People are going to find a way to use their own personal data storage. Is the place where I'm trying to protect it from not allowing Box or Google Drive or OneDrive or whatever the outside technology is? Or is it through a combination of that education awareness, but then that detection capability to know when it's happening, right? Because I find it unlikely that this scenario was the first time that person was using that sort of setup. They could have been using it for years or hundreds of times a day, whatever the case may be. You're right, it only takes one. But that's really where those protections come in, and adopting that situation of lots of BYO services, BYO identity, all those types of things are part of your security perimeter as well. And how do you adapt and adopt to it?
All right, well, moving on to my favorite story from the week, introducing the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework. It's not just because of the name, although it is catchy. At Black Hat, Amazon Web Services, IBM, and several other cybersecurity companies, things like Palo Alto Networks, Splunk, announced the formation of the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework to create a common data standard for sharing security information. The idea is to create a set of specifications for products and services to standardize alerts from different tools and speed interpretation of data. The current situation is vendors offer proprietary dashboards that require either manual labor or custom code, usually both, to move to other tools. Companies expect to integrate these specifications into products within the next few months. So, Jack, my question for you is not necessarily if this is a good idea, because I feel like in theory it's a good idea, but a lot of big name companies on board with the announcement of launch. I noticed some omissions. Just hear me out here. Google, Microsoft, Cisco, VMware, all not listed as launch partners for this. Not saying they're opposed to it, but they're not on board right now. Any of those companies are must-haves for this to get broader adoption?
No. I don't think any are must-have. I actually think it's a great idea. The framework and the idea that there is a marketplace of tools that different industry partners can adopt and implement and then be able to get a force multiplying effect from others is critical. We can replicate it to small extent, but it's actually really, really, really hard for security people to share threat information with other companies. It's relatively easy to share it with a government or a law enforcement agency, but it's ridiculously difficult to share it with another institution. It works best when you're on the same infrastructures right now, right? And you're doing a like for like. And if you are a big, 1,000-bed hospital, you're going to have a different type of security portfolio than a small 30-bed hospital, right? So there's a disenfranchisement that happens when we have proprietary data sharing schema, because the people that need it the most, and hospitals and healthcare is a good example of this, but I don't think it's unique, where we're all interconnected anyways. We are sending information for services, for patients, for care delivery, for research, for academic purposes, to many places. So if a 30-bed hospital in the north of the state is impacted because they can't afford, they don't have the roles, they don't have the maturity, they don't have the time, they don't have the priority to have a robust a series of cybersecurity protections. But what can we do? And one of the best things we can do is, how do I share information from our more mature frameworks to you to get the information that you could possibly use, so that little time or little dollars you have available to spend on cybersecurity, you have a better chance of it having an impact than if you were just to start from scratch. And that's sort of the hidden benefit here, is with the open cybersecurity schema framework, is it provides a path that makes it just a little bit easier to share information for those that may not be using your specific technology stack.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, Jack, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you that really stood out in the rundown today?
I really like the CISA article. I think, like you said, it's between the two administrations as developed, it's kind of kicked up a notch in the past couple of years, and there's some really great people there. So anytime we're talking about CISA and we're getting more people aligned and looking at it, I think that's to great benefit to everybody.
And just a reminder, if there's an article here we're talking about you haven't checked out yet, be sure to head over to CISOseries.com. We do have the show notes there with links to all the articles that we talk about. So be sure to check those out if you want to read up more about any of these. But I can tell, Jack, you already did the reading. Thank you so much. Jack Kufal, the CISO at Michigan Medicine. Truly, I could do this the rest of the afternoon. This was a ton of fun.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. And where can people find you on the cyberspace if they want to check out more of your stuff?
LinkedIn is a really good place to track me down. And I'm almost completely gone from everything else. So LinkedIn's solid. And
are you hiring at Michigan Medical right now?
Yeah, we are hiring. And I would say in general, we have a couple positions open just about any time of the year, just with our size and our attrition. So keep an eye at umjobs.org and look for us in Michigan Medicine.
Fantastic. Thank you also to our sponsor, Edgescan, necessary protection for your attack surface. We'll be back with another Week in Review show starting, as always, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 specifically in Pacific time at 12:30. And finally, you can still get your daily news fix through cybersecurity headlines every single day. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until next week, I'm Rich Straffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.